Everything you thought hypnosis was is wrong. Ultimately, in this video, I'm going to explain to you very simply what hypnosis is. This video is not for hypnotherapists, it's not for people wanting to hear the deep technical details, because simply the people that I'm talking to are entrepreneurs, business owners that think hypnosis is this mystical thing. You might think it's mind control or magic, it's not. Simply, I want you to think about this. When you were 0 to 8 years old, your brain operated in a state called theta. In this state, your subconscious mind is wide open to be programmed by life. Well, after the age of 8, you start to then have this analytical filter that stops things from coming in. The bad thing about that is, between 0 and 8, if life has happened and you've experienced things that are negative, well, that has been programmed into your subconscious mind. I want you to think about this. That's been programmed into your subconscious mind, and then you gain this filter, and it essentially blocks any of those things in your subconscious from leaving. They're stored there, and they become the programs that you then run on for the rest of your life. Well, until you use hypnosis. Because what hypnosis can do is it can open up this filter and allow you to go into your subconscious and rewire and reprogram those programs that were wired into you as a child. Think of hypnosis as the state that you can get into that mimics that malleable brain that you had as a child, but as an adult. And when you can do it as an adult with more conscious awareness, more life experience, it's actually very powerful, because then you can start to tie the new experiences that you have and move forward with an updated subconscious mind, and you're not a child anymore. So you can then start to logically take steps forward in your business. You can start to move towards the life that you want because you already know how to. This is the point. You already logically know that you're more than capable of doing what you should. You already logically know what you should take as the next step in your business. You already logically know it's possible. But the thing is, if you have subconscious programs that were wired into you between the ages of 0 and 8, you're going to be held back. There's going to be this weird invisible resistance that's stopping you taking action, that's causing procrastination, that's causing you to feel doubt and fear. Well, with hypnosis, we can go into that subconscious and we can rewire it. Because when you're in the state of hypnosis, that filter is wide open. But without hypnosis, you're not really able to expose the subconscious mind to be rewired. Now, I want you to think, well, Kyle, do I go into hypnosis? Is it something that happens regularly? Yeah, it actually does. I want you to think of a couple of examples of when you actually go into hypnosis. One example of how you literally hypnotize yourself is when you're falling asleep. I want you to think when you're falling asleep at nighttime, you lie there and you pretend to sleep. You lie there and pretend to sleep for long enough to the point where you drift naturally off into a sleep. Well, that is you going into hypnosis, a relaxed state of theta brainwaves, just like you are in 0 to 8, but eventually you go to sleep because your intention is to fall asleep. Another example is when you're driving the car. Have you ever been driving the car and you just go into this state where you're driving and then you forget the journey that you've just drove? Well, that's you going into hypnosis. That's you going into this relaxed state where there's no analytical, critical filter blocking anything from coming in. You're just in this completely relaxed state where your subconscious mind is wide open to be reprogrammed. That's what hypnosis is. So just make this super clear in your mind. The way you're operating right now, the state that your brain is operating in watching this video, is beta brainwaves. Is when you're logical, analytical, you're switched on and you're focused. Well, that state that you get into with hypnosis, that's theta. And that is the state that you operate in from 0 to 8 years old. That's the state where the subconscious mind, that filter is wide open for the subconscious to be reprogrammed. But imagine when you were a child, something happened that you couldn't predict. Something happened that made you feel fear and anxiety, but it happened out of nowhere. It happened when you were not expecting it. Well, what you learn as a child and what your brain then stores is that negative emotion that's tied to things that you can't predict. So as a child, what you then write as a program and make a decision to believe is anything that I cannot predict is not safe. Anything that I cannot predict and see clearly about what's about to happen might lead to that feeling that I once felt. So then what happens is your mind, your brain, will store this. And it will store this emotion in your nervous system. Some people store it as a gut feeling, this horrible anxiety, this gut punch. Some people have this tightness in their chest that they have. Some people store it in their throat. Ultimately, this is where you store this emotion. And you might even relate to this. That next step in your business, you see the numbers going down, you get bad news. That feeling shows up before you can even logically think, is this actually danger? That's your nervous system predicting the threat that you learned to avoid when you had that negatively intense experience when you were younger. Well, ultimately, imagine this is stored in your subconscious mind. This is below your conscious awareness. Well, does that not start to maybe explain and allow you to understand why when the business isn't going well, when something pops up, you get this weird fucking anxiety that's irrational and not really logical? Hopefully it starts to allow you to understand that. That is you emotionally resonating in the present moment with a stored emotion that you have from an experience that you have. And emotional resonance is just simply your nervous system and your subconscious mind recognizing something in your current present reality as the same as the event that happened. So if you had this thing that you couldn't expect, today that might show up as an email and bad news. But as a child, that could have been a traumatic event, like losing a family member or a car accident. Maybe not even as severe. It could generally just be a dog barking at you really loud and you think you're going to die. As a child, it's very dramatic. Looking back, logically, it's not a big deal. But in that moment, your nervous system remembers and stores this experience as something that you should avoid going forward. And a really important thing to understand is your nervous system, it predicts threat at around 14 milliseconds. Your thinking brain will kick in at about 500 milliseconds. So before you even know it, your nervous system is predicting threat, your state is changing, and that's why you look back and realize that you've been in a bad state. You don't catch it before you go into the state because this all happens subconsciously. We create this subconscious perception on life that we're not even aware of based on what you have stored in your subconscious mind. And again, let me give you an example so it's super clear. So one of my clients, every single time the numbers in his business dropped, he would have this anxiety inside of him. Irrational. There was no fear to be had. His life wasn't in danger. But the reason for this was when he was younger, he had an experience where when he didn't do well, and it was in a sport that he played, that led to a lot of stress. That led to him letting his parents down. That led to him not feeling good enough. That led to him not being rewarded. So ultimately his nervous system started to predict, when I do not get the result, I'm not good enough. I am not able to feel good. So his nervous system started to predict this in his business as something to feel scared of, as something to have fear at, as something to have anxiety of. And this doesn't logically make sense. That you might be thinking right now, okay, well that actually doesn't make sense. But I want you to think, this goes deeper than just what you think makes sense. Your subconscious mind, your nervous system, has adapted over so many years. Think back to when there was tribes. We were cutting about as cavemen and we were not in this built-up society that we have today. Well, imagine in this scenario, my client didn't get rewarded by his parents, wasn't loved by his parents, right? Wasn't accepted by his parents when he didn't do well. Well, what does his nervous system predict? His nervous system predicts, I'm not going to be accepted as part of the tribe. I'm not going to be loved and looked after as part of the tribe if this thing doesn't happen. Well, what would that lead to back in the day? That would lead to death. If you were not loved or accepted by the tribe, you would be eaten by a predator, or you would be killed by another tribe. This is literally what your nervous system and your subconscious mind is predicting. It's predicting threat. It's not rational, but it's predicting that you might die. It's predicting that you might actually be in real danger, but you're not. And this is why it's confusing, that you get this irrational fear and anxiety around your business not going in the right direction, getting bad news, numbers dropping in the business, whatever it is for you. You can relate to this and you can apply it to yourself. But this is why you have a rational fear, because your nervous system and your subconscious mind is predicting a threat that you've learned to avoid, and this has happened very likely between the ages of 0 and 8. Before you could logically think, is this actually dangerous? Does this actually threaten my life? Before you learned that, and before you were able to consciously reject that, your subconscious mind downloaded this as a program to keep you safe and help you survive. And ultimately, in life, we have these experiences that shape us. And if you're not consciously aware of the fact that you were shaped by these experiences, these programs run in the background. And that's why you have the fear, that's why you have the anxiety, that's why you have the resistance that's so frustrating because you can't explain it. It's so frustrating because consciously you know that you're not the guy that should be held back by this. But you cannot argue consciously with your subconscious. Your conscious mind is so tiny in comparison to the subconscious. I want you to think about the iceberg analogy. The tip of the iceberg is your conscious mind. Under that is your subconscious mind. And if you're trying to fight the subconscious programs that you have that have been written and programmed into you with your tiny little conscious mind is going to be frustrating, it's going to be an uphill battle, and ultimately you're not going to be able to win. The subconscious wins every time. The subconscious controls, and this has been shown by science, up to and around 95% of your automatic behaviors, the decisions you make, and how you react. Like I spoke about earlier, you're unconsciously perceiving reality based on what you have stored in your subconscious mind. Your nervous system is predicting threat and reacting before you have a chance to think and interrupt it. And that's why you find yourself in a negative state and you're not able to stop it. Well, imagine you could use something like hypnosis to remove those stored emotions. So one of the things that I mentioned there was emotional resonance. This is because you have stored emotions from memories and experiences that you've been through. When you have emotional resonance with the present moment, that is your nervous system predicting a threat as if that event that happened is about to happen, even if it's logically not actually happening, right? Well, ultimately, what is a technique that you can use in hypnosis, hypnotherapy, to remove this emotional charge? Well, one of them is MER, mental and emotional release. And in this technique, I'm not going to run you through exactly how it works because it's different how I approach it specifically for each client. But ultimately, this allows you to reprocess that memory that you had, but in a way where you can remove the emotional charge. When you can remove the emotional charge from that memory, there's no longer an ability for your nervous system to emotionally resonate with the present moment. So MER, mental and emotional release, that is a really good technique that I use with my clients, and I actually used it with Alex that's behind the camera right now. And Alex can vouch for this. Last night when we were explaining and talking about the memories that he had, the experiences he'd been through, and he literally called it a disgusting feeling. And Alex, right now, yes or no, can you feel it when you think back?
Not really, no.
Alex says not really because he loves to hold on to fucking problems, right? But Alex can't feel it. It's not a not really, he actually can't feel the fucking disgusting feeling anymore. And that means that no longer is his nervous system going to predict the same threat because the emotional charge has been removed from that memory. The most empirically backed technique used in psychotherapy and hypnosis is a technique called memory reconsolidation. And again, this is another technique that I use with my clients because it allows them to reconsolidate memories that shape them. Ultimately, like I've spoke about, when you have experiences in your life that are negatively emotionally and are intense emotions, you're shaped by them. We've spoke about that. You understand that by now. Well, ultimately, what memory reconsolidation does is it allows you to, instead of holding on to that lesson that you learned, holding on to that prediction that you made that this thing is dangerous, this thing leads to danger, well, you can actually create a prediction error. You can go back into that initial memory where you predicted that this thing isn't safe and going forward, I'm going to avoid it to survive. You can go in and you can create a prediction error. You can actually unlearn that, and this is a process that your brain goes through, is it unlearns that prediction. It unlearns that that thing is actually dangerous. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to stop predicting that threat. Your brain is a prediction machine. That's all it can do. All it can do is it can predict the future and what's going to happen based on what happened in the past. Your brain is not in any way able to think about reality and see reality in a way that's not related to what you've experienced. Your brain only knows what it knows. Your brain cannot predict that you're going to make £1 million tomorrow if you've never made £1 million. If you've never went through or experienced life in a way where you have made that, then ultimately your brain cannot predict that. Your brain's only going to be able to predict what's about to happen based on what's already happened. Well, imagine instead of you learning that being yourself isn't safe. Imagine you didn't learn that when you can't predict things, that could lead to death or that could lead to fear and anxiety. Well, if you never learned that, your brain would never predict it. You would never have this emotional resonance with the present moment. You would never have this resistance. And using memory reconsolidation, you can go back into that initial memory that shaped you and you can reconsolidate and create a prediction error. This is the technical terms. And creating that prediction error allows you to unlearn that lesson that you learned that has shaped you up to this point today. And going back to hypnosis and why that's important, hypnosis is the state where you can unlearn that. Because if I was to sit and speak to you logically, and I was to sit and speak to your conscious logical mind and say, by the way, just go into that memory right now and don't feel fear, it's not going to work. If I consciously try to talk you out of consciously thinking that that's dangerous or try to consciously rewrite that memory with you, it's never going to work, right? But if we get into the state of hypnosis, which is the relaxed theta brainwave state, well then guess what? The gate to your subconscious mind is open. That analytical conscious mind that would argue with me and not allow that to change, that wouldn't be there. essentially that quietens down, and that allows us to go into your subconscious and make those changes that allow you to then remove the resistance that's shown up today by removing the emotional charge that's tied to those memories that today is emotionally resonating with the present moment and giving you that irrational fear and anxiety that you experience. So again, I'll give you an example. One of my clients, Reese, he actually went through a really traumatic event when he was younger where he found one of his parents not alive. Like, again, I don't want to talk about details, but he found them in a position where they weren't alive, and it was horrible. It was really, really, really fucking dramatic and horrible. One of the worst experiences you can have. And for his whole life, since he was 7 years old up until he was 22 when I worked with him, he had this horrible anxiety that existed in his chest. Well, by using age regression, memory reconsolidation, and going back into that memory and using somatic processing, he was able to remove this feeling and process this somatic feeling that he had stored and replace it with a powerful confidence. And he said straight after it, and I can actually play the clip right now.
It's like I no longer hold something, whatever it was, it feels right here, whatever I can feel here, I'm no longer holding it. It's like I've just been flushed, if that makes sense.
He said straight after, Kyle, there's nothing here anymore. I don't have this feeling. I don't have this anxiety. It feels clear. For the first time in my life, this actually feels clear. And now it's filled with a powerful confidence. And he went from not being able to order food in a restaurant to now that things like this are not a problem. He went from really having a lot of anxiety around sending text messages and being an appointment setter to now phoning people and selling people on a phone. The kind of shift that he had using these techniques, because of the fact that he removed this, meant that he didn't have this in his life anymore. This feeling, this anxiety, this emotional resonance from something that he couldn't predict. Imagine when you were 7, something like that happens. You didn't expect to hear a scream from one of your parents and then find the other one not alive. That's horrible. It's one of the most unpredictable, horrible things that could ever happen. Well, what then he learned as that age, he learned that anything he couldn't predict wasn't safe. So then as an adult, again, going to a restaurant, you don't know how the waiter's going to respond, you don't know who's going to be there, you don't know what could potentially happen. Well, he had anxiety and didn't even go to restaurants. These kind of things aren't logical. He logically knew he wasn't going to die when he went to a restaurant. He logically knew that no one was going to pass away being in an environment where he couldn't predict what was going to happen. But as a child, what did he learn? What did his nervous system imprint as a code? Anything I can't predict isn't safe. So anything I can't predict, I'm going to avoid. Anything I can't predict, I'm going to generate that same fear response so that I can avoid it to survive. Again, not logical, not rational. But the subconscious mind isn't rational. Your subconscious mind is irrational. And it operates below your conscious awareness. And that's why Reese was like, why do I still have this anxiety? It's ruining my life because I'm not in a position where I consciously agree with feeling this. It's just showing up in my fucking life. Well, ultimately it's because his nervous system learned to protect him from a threat, and that threat was something that he couldn't predict. So hopefully this is becoming very clear now and allowing you to logically understand that hypnosis is a state that you get into, and there's different hypnotherapeutic techniques in therapy that you can use to remove emotional charge from memories that you had, to almost reprogram your subconscious mind to align with the life that you want. Because there's another technique that I use, and it's identity installation. And using this technique, you can actually install the new identity. You can allow clients to emotionally experience what it's like to have that life so that their subconscious mind and nervous system starts to feel safe experiencing that life. I want you to think about this. If I said to you, right now, as you're consciously watching this video, what is it like to sit and you're making £1 million? What's it like to change lots of life? What's it like to have the life that you want? You'd be sitting there like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm sitting watching this YouTube video. Well, imagine you got into a relaxed state. Imagine you get into the state of hypnosis. Well, in that state, because your analytical mind is quiet, you're not going to reject those images. You're not going to reject that visualization, because that's another part of it, is getting you to visualize and see things and see images. You're not going to reject that because you're in the state of hypnosis. Well, in that state, what I can do is I can actually get you to imagine and visualize having that life that you want. And when you're in that state, you're going to emotionally experience and having that life. Well, then what happens? That emotional experience is then experienced by your whole being, by your subconscious mind and your nervous system. Well, your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between what is reality and what's vividly imagined. So the reality is you're actually experiencing that life. And what happens in life when you emotionally experience things like we spoke about, you write codes, you create these scripts that you run on that associate either safety or danger, threat, again, allowing you to then either do something or not do something. Well, imagine you're emotionally experiencing life that you want. You're going to then start to, like your subconscious mind is then going to start to become familiar with how that life feels. And what's familiar is safe. What's unfamiliar isn't safe. What's unfamiliar is danger, it's threat, it's fear, it's anxiety, it's all those things. Well, if you can start to emotionally experience in the life that you want in this relaxed state of hypnosis, you can then start to actually become familiar with what it's like to have the money, to have the freedom, to have the joy, to have the happiness, to have the peace, the love. And if you can start to become familiar with that, well, are you going to, let me ask you this, are you going to avoid what's familiar? Are you going to avoid with what is safe and what feels good to your nervous system? No. So think about it. If I'm able to get you into this relaxed state and you're able to get into it, ultimately it's you that does it. It's not just me that does it. You do it to yourself. This only works with people that are actually willing to change, people that are willing to tap into the state of hypnosis. I'm not a magician, hypnotist, hypnotherapist. They're not fucking magicians. They don't control your mind. You do it. You do the work. And that's the powerful thing about hypnosis and hypnotherapy is you're in a position to make the change. And as long as you have a desire to make the change will happen. Well, imagine we could understand what experiences in life have shaped you. Imagine we could understand in what way that resistance is now showing up today and how that logically doesn't make sense to what you truly consciously desire. Well, then we can start to use these techniques. You can get into the state of hypnosis to remove this resistance and unlearn those limitations. You can think about it, unshape yourself from the way you were shaped. Because the only reason that you are today experiencing this irrational fear is because, as I've explained, the emotional resonance from the stored emotion and the memory that you have stored in your subconscious and in your nervous system. Well, imagine you can use these techniques to remove that. Well, you can. And imagine you could install the new identity and emotional experience to having the life that you want and start to become familiar and actually feel good about having the success instead of being resistant to it. Well, you can. You can do these things using hypnosis. Not turning into a chicken, not any kind of mystical approach, not speaking snake tongue and using fucking crazy languages that you don't explain, but by simply getting into that relaxed state and allowing yourself to reprogram your subconscious mind using some of the techniques that I've spoke about today. But again, each approach is different. Each subject that I work with, each client that I have, there's a different approach. As a hypnotherapist, as a coach, I use an intuitive approach with my clients. And I want to reinforce, hypnosis, hypnotherapy is one tool that I use. It's not everything that I do. Hypnosis is not hypnosis and hypnotherapy, it's not a done for you thing. Okay, you could have a complete shift using hypnosis, but if your environment doesn't change, if the people around you don't change, if your life doesn't change, if your habits don't change, it's not going to stick. It's not a permanent change if the things around you don't change. So in order for your habits to change, your identity to stick, and your life to actually permanently change, there needs to be more work done outside of hypnosis. Okay, because imagine the scenario where you have a habit of smoking. Cool, we can remove that using hypnosis. We can remove that using the therapeutic techniques. But imagine you go home and there's packets of cigarettes lying about. Imagine you go home and there's lighters everywhere. Well, unconsciously, you're likely going to be triggered back into those habits and routines and patterns that you once had. It's not a done for you service, and this is why it's a tool that I use. It's not everything that I do. I don't only do hypnosis. I'm not just a hypnotherapist. I use hypnotherapy and psychotherapy techniques to help my clients remove resistance at the deepest core level, your identity, subconscious mind, and your nervous system. But ultimately around that, there's a system that allows you to anchor a clear vision, a clear identity, and engineer your life in a way that supports that new identity, that supports that shift and allows you to maintain that shift to move towards the life that you want and inevitably achieve every goal that you set out to achieve. So now you know that hypnosis isn't magic. It's not bullshit. It's not woo-woo. There's actually a logical approach that I personally take. I know you might see other people that are doing hypnotherapy and it seems mystical, but I like to keep things practical and logical. I wouldn't do this if it didn't work. Ultimately, by now, watching this video, if you're here already, you know it's worked. You know it works. You know people get results because of the results that I've told you about. And by the way that I've explained it, you now actually understand what hypnosis is and how it's used. Well, by that simple fact, I think the logical next step is, if you feel that you have resistance, which you know yourself you do, click the link below, and when you click that link, we can have a conversation, we can create clarity around what the next steps are, because I know you're ready to change. You wouldn't be watching this part of the video if you weren't ready to actually make a permanent change in your life and start moving past that resistance that's been invisible and holding you back for fucking, I don't know how long. Could be months, could be years, very likely years, because ultimately, if you've never done this work, you have got these scripts that are running unconsciously from being a child, and they run until you remove them. They run until you rewrite them. So click the link, book the call. Let's make some permanent changes and achieve every fucking goal that you want to achieve.